Thanks so much for being with us here on Atlanta News First Plus. I'm Joy Lim Nakrin. Just wanted to bring you up to date on the latest in the YSL case. Remember, one of the attorneys for one of the defendants was arrested last week in court. His name is Anastasios Manetas. And he's actually joining us here live on Atlanta News First Plus today. Thanks so much for being with us. There's so much to catch our viewers up on Mr. Manetas because you were arrested last Thursday. You got out on bond, and then you went back into court Friday representing your client, who is now the first defendant in this huge case to actually be granted bond. I'm trying to encapsulate it, into just kind of just a short summary. But can you explain to us what happened?
Well, yeah, it was a pretty crazy week. So it started on Monday. There was a bond hearing for my client, Mr. Miles Farley. He had previously been denied bond 3 other times. Latest was back in December of 2022. And so we do the bond hearing. It goes really well. The judge decides to wait, which is taking it under advisement, was his exact words, which means waiting. And so he said he'll rule on it later. I'll tell you Wednesday. And then we have the day off Tuesday. On Wednesday, there's this kind of mishandling by the deputies of the security of the courtroom, and then this strange event where like 12 deputies come and just grab this other defendant, Rodelius Ryan, and take him away, and then they're screaming, and then there's just chaos in the courtroom. And then later on, Mr. Steele, sees it for what it is, and there were reports that the district attorney had been telling media to go there that day, that something big would happen. And so Mr. Steele talks about it being an orchestrated event. And then the very next day, that morning, we're doing our second day in a row of bag checking. They were checking our bags, which was a new thing for that week, going in our attorney bags, which many of us were upset about and has never happened before. And so then now flash forward to Thursday, it's been real heated. The deputies have like a constant negative energy in the room, not all of them, but a lot of them. And so there's always this kind of negative energy and hostility that, maybe we don't react the best to, but we're dealing with things we never had before, privacy being invaded in a different kind of way. And so it's me sort of, voicing that, feeling that, saying I'm humiliating, or that I'm feeling humiliated, and that it's invasive and stuff. And so we're kind of having an impolite discussion with the deputies, and while they're searching my bag, they find my own medications that are prescribed from my doctor, and ultimately I end up being, wrongfully charged, like under the statute of pills not in their original container, because one of them was not in their original container. And so, yeah, which isn't even the law. The law is if you're a patient with a prescription from your doctor in your name, then you do not need to put them in their original container. Like, everybody knows this. And so I feel targeted. I feel like it was retaliation in the context. But, so I end up being taken into custody, and then I get a really good attorney, Mr. Brian Tevis. He has me out within like 12 hours. I was held at the courthouse till 5, then taken to the jail. It's really terrible in there, the way we've been hearing lately. It's all true. And so luckily they didn't process me in the normal way. They just did the initial thing, the medical screening, which is pretty degrading and dirty and just terrible. But, just the initial medical screening, and then the, bonding out process, because Second Chance Bail Bonds had already just posted my bond when they saw, that happen on the internet. Mm-hmm. And so, which was, pretty misreported on for a while. Just they were saying it was like prescription pills, like I was trying to bring some kind of contraband in. And then even the sheriff, after this had all been known, goes to the news and says that I brought in contraband. And they keep saying contraband, even though from the beginning it was my medication from my doctor. So, yeah, I mean, that was it. Yeah, I bond out. And then that whole bond hearing that we had on Monday, just never got addressed by the judge. And then also there was a cross-examination, I forgot to mention, of an officer that Monday. It was the first cross-examination of an officer in the case. That didn't go well for the state at all, and I think it added to the temperature in the courtroom and like possibly what happened to me on Thursday. But and then the other part of it, they charged me with they tried to make a scene out of a battery on a public official and like delaying a public proceeding and these trumped up charges of a false thing to begin with, because I was being illegally detained anyway. But all I did was try to get my attorney phone to a colleague so that my business can keep going and that my clients were inevitably going to see this on the news, wouldn't be alarmed or have someone to talk to. I try to toss it to him. It touches a deputy. They do what they do. They're excited about it. They lock me up. They take me away. Don't ask a lawyer. Don't ask a judge. Don't call my doctors. Didn't do anything. And they just enforced a law improperly. And you would think that law enforcement would know the law, but they didn't. And they locked me up. And then the phone thing happens, and nobody checked on anything. And then luckily, Mr. Tevis had me out within 12 hours. And then the next day, the judge says, come to court at 4 p.m. I have something about bond to tell you. And he brings us there. He tells me that Mr. Farley has now been severed
That's
from
your
the
client,
case.
is
Yeah,
Mr.
Mr. Farley. The defendant, Mr. Miles Farley, who, just a quick, is the creator of this clothing line, Make America Slime Again, which just has that same slime word in it, which is really just a pop culture youth term. And the state's trying to make it into a gang-only term because whatever they try to say YSL is, they want to say it's young slime life. And so that's kind of what brings Mr. Farley into all this. He's an entrepreneur doing marketing and product placement, and then he gets caught up in this thing with Fani and this RICO case. And so the judge brings us in, says, he's been severed. He was severed immediately. Court just proceeded after I was arrested. So I didn't know that because I was in jail. And so then basically Mr. Farley is sitting there with me, and we're with the judge, and the judge tells us, which shocked me, that I actually have decided on your bond ruling, and it's going to be this amount of money with this special conditions, and it's pretty high and has a lot of conditions, but we're just thrilled from the honorable court that he would even consider a bond, because no one has a bond in the case, and Mr. Farley's bond, my client, had been denied already 3 times.
Well,
Yeah, that's kind of everything in order.
Well, I want to ask you a little bit more about Mr. Farley, because this is a major development. Mr. Farley is now the first defendant. I mean, there were 28 people charged in this case. The first of these defendants to actually be granted bond, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, right, yeah. I was surprised by his denial of bond from the beginning, because really he's an HBCU graduate. He's born and raised on Cleveland Avenue. He goes to Miles College and returns with a business degree and is on Cleveland Avenue where he lives and where he was raised, and starts a clothing line and has no criminal history whatsoever. So I thought he was going to get a bond the first time, and then he didn't, and then he kept having his bond denied even though circumstances were changing. But this time the judge agreed that the circumstances changed so much that he should now have a bond, which was great.
I also am curious, because I understand that there's a murder charge for him. So that's why, there were some questions in the newsroom. Wait, this guy has a murder charge and he's the first one to be granted bond? What's going on?
Well, I mean, I don't think that's unusual. I mean, that's sadly part of the culture of the court system and certain judges that, if you have a murder case, you don't get a bond. But if you have no criminal history and you're accused of something you didn't do, like Mr. Farley, why shouldn't you have a bond? And so, we're grateful for that. The court saw that. There were certain proffers that the state was making at the time of other defendants and some kind of unknown intimidation and just different sort of scary things they would say to scare the judge. And then now all this time has passed. Nothing like that's happened. And I said during the bond hearing that Mr. Farley had been offered probation in the case if he would say certain things that weren't true, that he didn't know to be true. And he refused, and I think that kind of maybe played into the judge's logic. That was part of one of my arguments. The judge didn't say exactly what made a difference, but he just said that in his opinion circumstances had changed. But that was part of what I found suspicious and I was skeptical of, is like, you really think these people participated in a murder, or that there's some elaborate criminal organization, yet these people who you formerly said were in a command position and we're going to do all these things, you turned around and you offered them probation just for saying what you wanted to say. And so that was part of my argument at the bond hearing, and also some other things that painted Mr. Farley in an innocent way, because how are you going to say that this is true about phones and guns and this and all that, and yet we had like 10 releases of discovery, which of course don't have anything incriminating about Mr. Farley. Like, we knew that, but I guess the judge could now see that because we know there's not going to be anything in there all along, but then we tell the judge, like, look, tell the state, what's new out of all this new evidence that's going to, tell you that Mr. Farley has done anything wrong, and they had nothing to say, and so the judge gave a bond, and we're grateful to the court for that.
What was the circumstance surrounding that murder charge?
Yeah, I mean, it probably shouldn't say. I think that the judge doesn't want us to speak about the discovery and the actual facts, but it's circumstantial, for the other defendants on the count, and then it's with Mr. Farley, it involves just his mere presence.
And this is related
somewhere.
to this whole YSL case. This is not a separate, unrelated murder charge. Is that right?
Yeah, right. It's count 49 on the indictment,
Okay.
and they're alleging that it's somehow promoting the interests of some supposed conspiracy. So.
Okay. I have another question for you. So you also shared to me that the bond for Mr. Farley is very high. It's $625,000, I believe. So my question to you is two-part. Number one, I believe that you are a court-appointed defense attorney, which would mean that Mr. Farley's indigent. So number two, if he's indigent, how is he going to afford $625,000 bond?
I mean, right, that would be a lot for even the non-indigent to afford, and then given his background, but so we're so grateful for it. But yeah, I'm actually not court appointed. I was doing the case as friends of the family with the Farley family,
Okay.
because I'm friends with his dad, who's never had any criminal or gang affiliation, and neither does Miles. And so, I was friends with the family, and it just seemed like something that I should get involved in, and it's gone pretty well so far. So.
Is he going to be able to post that bond?
I hope so. Bonding companies will step in, and their business model is to post part of it for you, most of it for you, where you post a small part of it. But even a small part of almost $700,000 for someone who was just about to get his business, Make America Slime Again, just off the ground. He was still in the more initial phases of that, business that had an LLC and everything was legitimate. It was just clothing, and so. Of course, being locked up for a year, he's been locked up since April 1st of 2022, and so he's strong and he's made it, but that's a really high bond. So yeah, he's working on it, and I'm confident that we're somehow going to post it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, YSL case defense attorney Anastasios Menetas. Appreciate you joining us and kind of letting us behind the curtain in this case.
All right. Yep. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.